On my video about shelters, I got this comment from NubbyStump6774. Not a word about one of the greatest joys of backpacking, sleeping under the stars. I think this is a case where context matters. Hiking in the eastern U.S. on the Appalachian Trail doesn't give a lot of good opportunities to do this. Nubby goes on to say, most of the places I hike have fairly stable, predictable weather, and if the forecast calls for storms, I'm probably going to postpone my trip anyway. Nubby Stumps raises two really good points: the joy of sleeping under the stars and the wisdom of planning for it. There's only a few times I can remember sleeping under the stars, sometimes called cowboy camping. The first time was on my very first hike ever with my father in 1969. In those days, trails were not well documented. We had problems finding it, and we got a late start. I think my father's plan was to get us to a trailside shelter, but it got too dark for hiking. We were coming down a hillside known as Jones's Nose when we lost the trail. Near the bottom of the hill, my father laid down a tarp and we slept in borrowed sleeping bags out in the open. My next time under the stars came in 2011 when my son and I were hiking in the Grand Canyon. On our third night on the plateau, the weather was looking good, so we laid down some ponchos and ground cloths and slept outside. This is the first time I got to really see the Milky Way. That's a rare sight in the light-polluted northeast U.S. where I live. The stars were so numerous that I couldn't even pick out familiar constellations. I'm used to seeing the textbook brightest stars only, and even though it was a moonless night, I could have read a newspaper by the starlight. I found this simulation of the night sky for that exact date. Here's the plus side of sleeping out. That stargazing, especially if you normally don't get the chance where you live, is an experience you won't want to miss. There's camp efficiency. With no shelter set up or takedown, you have more time to spend either on the trail or relaxing. There's flexibility. If you're in an area where setting up a tent is difficult either because of limited flat spots or hard-pan soil that makes sinking stakes difficult, you don't deal with that. The airflow is great. If you get claustrophobic or feel too restricted in a tent, or you're in weather where a tent would be too hot, you avoid that. If you're in a dry climate, you don't have to worry about condensation on your sleeping bag from your breathing in an enclosed space. Those clear skies mean you can see more stars, but also means more heat loss if there's no cloud or canopy cover to retain it. This brings up disadvantages. If you're in an area where the weather can change quickly, well, the weather can change quickly. Depending on where you are, exposure to mosquitoes and ticks is increased. Certainly in more humid climates, morning dew is a big problem. Anyone who has set up their tent in an open field on the AT knows about this. Just think of what it's like to hike across an open field or bald early in the morning before the sun has baked off the moisture. Your boots get drenched. If you sleep out in an open field in such an environment, that's what will be on your sleeping bag in the morning. You may not have to deal with megafauna like bears or elks, but disease-carrying rodents are pretty universal on the trail, and you may end up with closer contact with them than you'd like. Let's look at site selection. You might think it's just laying down a ground cloth and unrolling a sleeping bag, but there's more to it. In more humid climates, an open field gives you a better view of the sky, but there's no protection from the moisture or wind. Under the tree canopy, you get some wind protection and some response time if it starts raining. The canopy often absorbs some of the rain before it gets to the ground. You may prefer to be slightly elevated from the surrounding ground, both because cold air pools towards the ground, and so does rainwater if it comes to that. I experienced the cold air even inside my tent on the John Muir Trail. Another thing we might forget, most backpacking tents have a bathtub floor that can protect us from a small amount of water pooling. Not so with sleeping out, so be sure you're not in a natural water collection point. Camp away from water sources like lakes and ponds where insects concentrate. Have a backup plan if the weather turns bad. Know before you lie down what you'll do for shelter if it starts to rain. Setting up a tent ahead of time would defeat one of the whole purposes of sleeping outside, but at least have a poncho or tarp within easy reach. And maybe it wouldn't be too much of a compromise to have a tarp set up ahead of time. Tarp isn't much protection against bugs and driving rain, but it's better than nothing. I have this essential rule. I'd never leave all shelter behind, even if I was planning to sleep out. Now, Nubby Stumps has been doing this for 60 years, so has the experience to know when it's necessary. But if you don't have that 60 years behind you, don't take the chance. The bottom line is this. Sleeping under the stars is an experience worth planning for, at least under the right conditions. Good weather, low dew point, a new moon if stargazing is your desire, and you know where there are good sights. My biggest disappointment on the JMT last year was that the California wildfires blocked my view of the night sky. Wherever you are, if you get a chance to sleep under a clear night sky, don't miss it. Like Nubby Stump says, it's one of the greatest joys of backpacking. If you found this information useful, please like, share, subscribe, and comment on this or other topics you'd like me to cover. And if you haven't seen this video, please take a look at it now. Thanks for listening.